Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Director. Been a lot of discussion around the debt and the deficit. I share the concerns that have been expressed in both sides of the aisle. I think it's a threat to our economic future and to our country if we aren't able to get it under control. I'd like to thank the administration, thank the President for taking what I think is a very important first step, and that is generating strong economic growth. I believe that we cannot, at 1.9% growth, get this under control, and so the regulatory relief, the tax reform that the President has shown the leadership in really is the first step needed to solve the deficit. I am disappointed that the budget doesn't balance, as you have testified, within a 10-year period, but I'm understanding you're saying that you expect annual deficits to decrease. Could you expand on that? And further, do you think we are, if not within 10 years, are we putting with this budget ourselves on a path of balancing the budget within a certain period of time? And if so, how long would that take?
Sure. The projections right now, keep in mind these projections may change a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, simply because we've not had a chance to fully digest the CAPS deal. There's bits and pieces. The example I give is there's a 2-year extension to the mandatory sequester that we have to factor in, I think, but these numbers should roughly stay the same, which is that we're looking at $948 billion in deficits this year. That goes down to $448 in 2028. Keep in mind, a big piece of that in the out years is our assumption, and we've not raised this yet, Mr. Smucker, our assumption that the reduction in individual tax rates that phase out under the tax bill are actually made permanent. So if you actually ran this against the tax law itself verbatim, the numbers would actually be smaller, but we always thought it was a fair point to make the case that we thought that was good policy. The only reason it wasn't permanent in the first place was to deal with the reconciliation rules in the Senate. So the budget assumes something that actually goes beyond what the tax bill does. But we sort of trend it down. You've heard me say earlier that gets the deficit down around 1.1% of GDP in the last year. To your larger question, outside the budget window, we went back and forth in this sort of philosophically within the office. I didn't want to go any further than that. I think that coming to you and saying, oh, don't worry, the budget balance is in 17 years or 27 years or 37 years, I thought that undermined the credibility of the numbers. I thought it was much more difficult for the administration to come in and admit that it wasn't going to balance, but I think it's a lot more honest and transparent and accountable to do exactly that, which is why we did it.
I would love to follow up on that, but I have an additional question I'd like to ask you.
And I'll try and give shorter answers. I apologize.
After serving in the Budget Committee for 1 year, in the past year, one of the biggest takeaways is how broken the process is. And that's certainly, it's recognized by probably everyone in this room. It's very difficult to even argue that the federal budget process is working when in the past 20 years we've had more than 100 CRs, an average of 5 per year. And under the current budget process, there have been 19 government shutdowns. It's just simply unacceptable. I've seen the difference in the Pennsylvania State Senate. I've seen the difference in the process there from here. Very decentralized, not a lot of accountability in the process. Do you believe that there needs to be greater coordination between federal agencies such as OMB and Congress throughout the current budget process to ensure more fiscal responsibility?
I'd welcome that. In fact, I've been pleasantly surprised to hear some of my Democrat folks especially commend me and my staff for being much more available than in previous administrations of both parties. So we've looked forward to doing that, continuing that. I would suggest to you, however, that really the hurdle right now to the appropriations process functioning is not OMB and it's not the House, it's the Senate. And until they figure out a way to either work together or figure out a way to change the rules to allow them to pass bills with a majority and not a supermajority, it is unlikely that we'll see an end to the current budget impasses that we have.
Yeah, I believe there are other changes that we could make in the process to drive additional accountability. In fact, a few weeks ago, introduced a bill that would create a joint commission on budget process. And this is modeled after something we did in Pennsylvania where we had a similar difficult problem there for decades and created a sort of an inside commission with appointed members from the House, in that case the Senate and the administration. And my idea would be to do that here as well. It would include folks from the administration, potentially yourself. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Do you believe that the administration should be involved in efforts by Congress to reform the federal budget process?
We would absolutely welcome it. In fact, I encourage you to reach out to your counterpart, Mr. Enzi, in the Senate. He's one of the leading voices over there on budget process reform. Also, Senator Daines, a former member of this body, very interested in trying to figure out a way to reform the system so that it works and we can spend money appropriately.
I think it's a bipartisan issue. It's one that we should all look to try to solve. So thank you. Look forward to continued discussions on that.
Gentleman yields back.